The marble steps of the Jefferson County Courthouse gleamed under the late morning sun, their smooth surface polished by decades of hurried footsteps and heavy boots. The building itself stood as a monument to justice, tall columns, bronze doors, and a proud inscription etched across its front, equal justice under law. For most who entered, the phrase was more aspirational than actual, especially for black men like Martin Hughes. Martin wasn't just any man, though. He wasn't the janitor, nor an accused defendant, nor a witness summoned against his will. He was Judge Martin Hughes, recently appointed to the Superior Court bench after 20 years of practicing law, fighting civil rights cases, and building a reputation as a sharp, uncompromising attorney. Yet, on this particular morning, dressed simply in a charcoal suit rather than his robe, carrying only a leather briefcase and the fatigue of a restless night, Martin looked like any other black man stepping into a courthouse. And that was precisely the problem. Two uniformed deputies, neither of whom had ever worked under Hughes before, watched him approach the metal detector. They had been bickering about football scores moments earlier, but when Martin placed his briefcase on the conveyor belt and walked through, the beeping alarm went off. It wasn't unusual. Sometimes belt buckles or pens triggered it. "Step back, sir," barked Deputy Connolly, tall and heavy-set, his hand automatically reaching for Martin's shoulder. Martin complied calmly. "It's probably just the belt," he said, lifting his arms slightly to cooperate. "Don't tell me what it probably is," Connolly snapped. His partner, Officer Gaines, a younger man with a sharp jawline and impatient eyes, circled around. They patted him down roughly, ignoring Martin's attempt to explain that he had a hearing scheduled inside. When Connolly felt something in Martin's pocket, his car keys, he yanked them out as though they were contraband. "What's this? You think you can sneak something in here?" Martin raised an eyebrow. "Keys. To my car. Do you—" Before he could finish, Gaines shoved him against the cold marble wall. The sudden movement startled nearby visitors. A mother clutched her child closer, an older man froze in line, and whispers filled the lobby. "Hey!" Martin exclaimed, his voice carrying not anger but indignation. "Don't get loud with me." Gaines snapped, and with a swift motion, his open palm smacked across Martin's cheek. The slap echoed through the atrium like a gunshot. The room went silent. For a long second, Martin simply stood there. His jaw clenched, his eyes darkened, and his body trembled, not from fear, but from the collision of rage and restraint. He had spent his career teaching young black men how to survive such moments. Breathe. Don't react. Your dignity is stronger than their ignorance. But never had he expected to face it here, in his own courthouse. Connolly chuckled nervously, trying to mask his partner's overreaction. "Cooperate, and this won't get worse," he said. "I am cooperating," Martin said evenly, his baritone voice filling the lobby. "Now, take your hands off me." The deputies didn't budge. Gaines scoffed. "Who do you think you are?" Martin fixed his gaze on them, his cheeks still stinging, and uttered the words that turned the entire scene upside down. "I am Judge Hughes, and this is my courtroom you're standing in." The silence that followed was deafening. The mother gasped. The older man muttered, "Lord have mercy." The clerks behind the counter exchanged horrified glances. Connolly's hand fell from Martin's arm like a stone. Gaines blinked, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for an exit in midair. "Why, you're Judge Hughes." Gaines stammered. Martin adjusted his tie, straightened his back, and walked past them toward the inner hallway. Every pair of eyes in the lobby followed him, some with awe, some with guilt, all with disbelief. The slap still echoed in everyone's memory. Inside his chambers, Martin shut the door and allowed himself a single deep breath. His reflection in the mirror showed the faint redness on his cheek, a temporary brand of humiliation. He pressed his palm against it, the sting sharper than he wanted to admit. He thought of his late father, a postal worker, who had once been dragged from his car during a traffic stop simply for fitting a description. His father had warned him that no amount of degrees, titles, or robes could shield him entirely. "Son," he had said, "to them, you'll always be a black man first. Remember that. Carry yourself accordingly, but never forget it." And now here he was, living proof of his father's warning, inside a courthouse that bore his name on the daily docket. The bailiff knocked. "Judge Hughes, the courtroom is ready." Martin glanced at the clock. The irony twisted in his stomach. In 10 minutes, he was scheduled to preside over a police misconduct case. He put on his robe, the heavy black fabric draped over him like armor. As he walked into the courtroom, the very same deputies who had assaulted him were standing by the door, their faces pale. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The audience rose. The courtroom filled with the scrape of benches and the rustle of jackets. Martin ascended the bench slowly, each step deliberate, his cheek still faintly marked, his dignity unbroken. When he sat down, he surveyed the room. Plaintiffs, defendants, lawyers, journalists, all watching. The deputies avoided his eyes, but Martin made sure to lock his gaze on them, steady and unflinching. "Good morning," he said, finally, his voice resonating with authority. "Court is now in session." But beneath that calm tone lay the fury of a man wronged, the determination of a judge who knew that justice wasn't just an abstract concept carved in stone outside, it was something that had to be fought for, even from the highest seat in the courtroom. The hearing began, routine in its procedures, but Martin's thoughts pulsed beneath every gavel strike. He knew what had happened in the lobby would not stay hidden. Witnesses had seen, whispers were already spreading, and soon the press would feast. Part of him wanted to summon Connolly and Gaines immediately, demand an explanation before the court, expose their prejudice under the bright lights of justice. Another part of him, the lawyer trained in patience and precision, urged restraint. Let the facts unfold. Let their own actions condemn them. For now, he chose silence. But the silence wasn't surrender. It was the pause before a storm. Because in this courthouse, under his watch, justice would not be blind to color, nor would it be deaf to the sound of a slap. And Judge Hughes was ready to ensure that. The news spread faster than wildfire through the courthouse corridors. By the afternoon recess, nearly every clerk, attorney, and bailiff had heard the whispers. The new judge had been slapped in the lobby by his own deputies. Some told the story with disbelief, others with outrage, and a few with quiet amusement at the absurdity of it all. But however it was told, one fact remained unshakable. The humiliation of Judge Hughes was public, and silence could no longer protect the guilty. Martin sat in his chambers after the morning docket, hands folded on his desk. His cheek had faded to a faint shadow, but the sting of the incident lingered deeper beneath the skin. He thought about the symbolism. A black man mistaken for a suspect, struck by officers of the very institution he was sworn to uphold. It wasn't just personal, it was systemic, the kind of story that resonated far beyond these walls. The intercom buzzed. His clerk's cautious voice followed. "Judge, the deputies from this morning, they're outside your door. They want to speak with you." Martin didn't answer right away. He stared at the closed door, picturing their faces. Fear, shame, maybe even anger that their mistake had turned against them. He wasn't sure what they wanted: apology, explanation, or plea. But he knew one thing. Whatever words they offered, they would not undo the act itself. Finally, he pressed the button. "Send them in." The door opened, and deputies Connolly and Gaines stepped in, their uniforms stiff, their hands fidgeting as though unsure whether to salute or hide. "Judge Hughes, sir," Connolly began, his tone heavy with forced respect. "We just wanted to say, well, about earlier, it was a misunderstanding." Martin leaned back, eyes steady. "A misunderstanding? You slapped a man in a courthouse lobby. You shoved him against a wall. And the only reason we're standing here now is because that man turned out to be your judge." Gaines shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, sir, you didn't identify yourself at first. You thought I was what?" Martin's voice cut, like steel. A defendant? A criminal? Someone who didn't belong in this courthouse? Neither deputy answered. The silence told him enough. Martin let the pause hang before speaking again. "I don't need your apologies. What I need is accountability. This isn't about me. This is about the people who walk into this courthouse every day without a robe, without a title, without protection. How many others have you treated the same way?" Connolly's face reddened. Gaines swallowed hard, looking down at the floor. "You'll hear from Internal Affairs soon," Martin concluded. "Until then, I suggest you reflect on the oath you swore, to serve and protect, not to slap and humiliate." Dismissed, the deputies shuffled out, their footsteps heavy with dread. By the next morning, local reporters had gathered outside the courthouse steps. Camera crews, microphones, and notepads swarmed the building. Headlines blared across town: "Judge assaulted by deputies in courthouse mix-up." Social media caught fire, with hashtags trending about race, policing, and justice. Martin hadn't planned to make a statement, but as he approached the entrance, a young journalist called out, "Judge Hughes, do you believe this incident was racially motivated?" He stopped mid-step. The crowd hushed. He could feel the heat of cameras fixed on him. Slowly, he turned to face them. His voice was calm, deliberate. "What happened to me in that lobby is something black men across this country have experienced for generations, being presumed guilty before being given a chance to speak. I was fortunate that my robe gave me protection after the fact. Most men don't have that privilege. So yes, this is about race. And yes, this is about justice." The microphones crackled, the crowd erupted with more questions, but Martin raised his hand. "I will not litigate this in the press. The court has its processes, and as long as I sit on that bench, I will ensure those processes are fair, transparent, and just." With that, he walked inside, leaving behind a frenzy of headlines that would only fuel the fire. That week, the internal investigation moved swiftly. Witnesses from the lobby were interviewed. Surveillance footage confirmed what the whispers already knew. The slap, the shove, the words exchanged, all preserved on camera. The sheriff's office placed both deputies on administrative leave pending review. Meanwhile, Martin continued presiding over his docket with unshakable composure. Each gavel strike seemed louder now, each ruling infused with the unspoken weight of his personal ordeal. Defendants looked at him differently, some with newfound hope, others with quiet respect. Even attorneys who once underestimated him carried themselves with more caution. But the true reckoning came when the sheriff himself requested a private meeting. "Judge Hughes," Sheriff Wallace began, his weathered face a mask of diplomacy, "let me first apologize on behalf of my department. What happened was unacceptable. Those deputies acted out of line." Martin studied him. "And yet, Sheriff, it happened. In broad daylight. Under your watch. What does that say about your department's training? About its culture?" Wallace shifted in his chair. "We're addressing that. Sensitivity training, mandatory de-escalation workshops, you name it. I want you to know we take this seriously." Martin nodded slowly. "Good. But remember, Sheriff, training isn't just about policy. It's about humanity. If your deputies can't see the humanity in the people they serve, no amount of workshops will save them." The sheriff cleared his throat, then leaned forward. "Off the record. Judge, is this going to become a crusade? I respect your position, but I have a department to run." Martin met his eyes, unwavering. "Justice isn't a crusade, Sheriff. It's a responsibility. One I intend to uphold, whether or not it makes you uncomfortable." The meeting ended with polite handshakes, but the tension lingered like smoke after a fire. Weeks later, the disciplinary hearing for Deputies Connolly and Gaines was held in the same courthouse where it all began. This time, Martin wasn't the presiding authority. He had recused himself to avoid conflict of interest, but he attended as a witness. The room was packed, with reporters in the back, community leaders in the front, and the public crammed in between. The deputies sat at the defense table, their uniforms replaced by plain suits, their eyes fixed on the floor. When called to testify, Martin stood tall, recounting the events with precision and restraint. He didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. He simply told the truth. "They saw a black man in a suit," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "And they assumed I was a threat. Their assumptions led to violence. Not because I resisted, not because I posed danger, but because of the color of my skin." The weight of his words settled over the courtroom like a shroud. When the hearing concluded, the panel recommended termination for both deputies. The decision sparked both outrage and applause. some claiming it was too harsh, others insisting it was long overdue. But for Martin, it wasn't about punishment. It was about precedent. For once, the system had acknowledged wrongdoing instead of burying it under excuses. That evening, Martin returned to his chambers alone. The courthouse was quiet, emptied of its daily bustle. He walked to the window, gazing at the inscription carved into the building's front, "Equal justice under law." For years, those words had felt hollow, more aspiration than reality. But now they carried new weight. They were no longer just a promise etched in stone. They were a challenge, one he had taken upon himself to uphold. He thought of his father again, of his warning, of his resilience. He thought of the countless unnamed men and women who never got the chance to say, "I am the judge," and he vowed silently that as long as he held the gavel, their stories would not be forgotten. Finally, he whispered to the empty room, "Justice isn't blind. It sees everything, and so do I." With that, he picked up his gavel, placed it gently on the bench, and turned off the lights. Because tomorrow, the fight for justice would begin again.